I'm very excited to introduce Pete Burdon. Pete, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. You'll be fairly exhausted by now, I imagine.
Yeah, it's all go. I'm getting what it must feel like to be in the newsroom of the 6 o'clock news at the moment.
Yeah,
So Pete, I'm sure many people will be recognizing your face and name, but perhaps if you could introduce yourself briefly and just let us know a little bit about who Pete is.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Matt. Well, I can tell you, firstly, I'm a bit of a cricket nut. I've been up watching cricket all week because I just love it. I'm a political junkie, and I've always been interested in the news media, sort of from the first time I was actually in the paper as a school kid playing soccer. So it goes back a wee way. And so with my work background, I started off as, after a couple of master's degrees, one in journalism and one in communication management. I started as a journalist, and then from there I moved into being a government press secretary in government. And it was really from there where I saw all these people making, major mistakes, and particularly talking to the media, because they clearly just didn't understand how it worked and how a media interview was quite different from any other conversation, because it really is quite different. And I also saw lots of people miss out on getting themselves sort of masses of, really positive media attention because they didn't really know how to go about doing that. So that's really what led to Media Training NZ and PeteBurdon.com.
Fantastic. Now, I know you are a published author. I actually have a copy of your book right here. I've had this in my hands for a couple of years now. I've found it really invaluable. And I guess for me, there's obviously been some pretty, it's been numerous large-scale events here in New Zealand and on an international scale in recent times. And one in which you commented on LinkedIn was in regards to the really awful event in Countdown, where an individual, through his actions, took several lives. But the commentary that you came up with was in regards to how the Countdown representative represented herself and also the brand. And I'd love to just pick your brains or spend a moment just understanding what your points were on that.
Yeah, sure. There was quite a lot involved there. The first thing is what a lot of people see a media interview as a Q&A with the reporter. And so they're really concerned about what the question's going to be. And while, we are going to answer questions, there's no doubt about that, but we need a clear message that we're going to keep going back to throughout the interview. And in a situation like that, where there are clearly victims, and you're under your watch, so to speak, the clear message generally is going to be empathy to start with, empathy for the victims, and it's going to be what you're doing about it, and then it can be some sort of reassurance type statement, and that's exactly what she used the whole way through that. She kept coming back to mainly the empathy thing, and what we're going to do to help all these people stop this happening again was the reassurance type statement. And a lot of people fall into the trap of, a lot of people just are so scared of actually even getting on camera, and that's why I recommend Media Training, because it is very different, and I can understand why people would be unhappy about that. But if you know what it's about, you know how you come across, and I think Michael from earlier would agree with us as well. If you see yourself on camera and you practice regularly, you can actually be really good, and you can turn a negative situation into a positive one. And that's clearly what she did, because what more could she have done than show the amazing amount of empathy that she did? And a lot of that, again, is body language. A lot of people don't think about body language, but a lot of it's how you're moving your hands and how you actually appear. And then she kept coming back to those points. And there are a few traps in there that you can really fall into that you wouldn't realise you could fall into. And she clearly didn't fall into any of those either. And she didn't sound like a robot. A lot of these people will read a statement out, we are, our thoughts are with the family at this difficult time. It could have been, she was a human talking in human language, and she was really, really perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, I've from previous lives, I was in front of the cameras quite a lot, particularly in the very early days of the Canterbury earthquakes. Not many people know this about me, but I used to be a union organizer. And so during those early days, representing several thousand workers here in Canterbury. I found myself in front of the Free News and TV1 News cameras quite a lot. And what I found, the mistake I often made was going in detail too much, and going down those kind of rabbit runs and not really understanding the potential damage that could have caused further down the road. So it seems like authenticity is one big piece of the puzzle, but the other piece is trying to keep it succinct and clear, and not going off on random tangents. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there are different types of interviews, but generally speaking, if you're doing a piece for like a TV news bulletin or a radio news program, literally they want about 10 seconds from you.
Yeah.
And so they're going to go through their tape, and they're going to find 10 seconds or anything with sort of 5 to 15 seconds worth. And that's a mistake a lot of people make. They sort of have a pet subject and they'll go into all sorts of detail, and then the reporter will take one sentence of that answer that might be totally out of context, and so they sort of lose that opportunity. But if you're very brief, you answer the question as briefly as you can, transfer back to one of your points all the time, and exciting ways of making those points. That's the key. If you can make your points in exciting ways, you've got huge control. I mean, John Key used to always talk about the All Blacks. He would always use analogies with the All Blacks. For example, at one point, I don't know if you remember, we were looking to get the seat on the Security Council of the UN, and all these delegates were coming down to New Zealand, and we were wining and dining them to try and get them to vote for us. Well, he got a question in one interview: Prime Minister, how much are we having to spend on those delegates coming down here? And so at one point in the interview, he answered that and said, well, I can't tell you that because that will give ammunition to our opponents for the seat. Well, that's fine. But then at another point in that interview, he said the exact point this way. He said, me telling you what we spent on those delegates would be like Steve Hansen giving the England rugby team the All Blacks game plan for next Saturday's test.
Yeah.
So you see what he's done? He's made the same point a different way. He's given the reporter a fantastic soundbite.
Yeah.
And so everyone wants. And that's how you do it. You have huge control. If you know how it works, it's not, they're just going to say what they want to say and all that sort of stuff. It's actually a particular skill involved.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a real skill. And perhaps for some tuning in, they may be kind of scratching their heads and going, well, how does this associate to my space within the health and safety world or within the leadership realm? Inevitably, not inevitably, but we need to ensure that we are at least prepared for scenarios such as this, when things that aren't planned happen within the place of work. Suddenly we find ourselves in the limelight. We might be the first people to the scene, or we may suddenly find that our senior leadership team have decided to delegate you as the health and safety manager. Suddenly you're the one responsible for the media. Could happen. And also we need to be sure that our senior leaders and executive are aware of the types of trappings and pitfalls they need to be aware of and what good looks like. So Pete's insight is, again, invaluable. I'll certainly be alluding to where they should be getting in touch with Pete after this interview. But for now, I think what I was going to say was we've all been given this really interesting insight into what a press conference room looks like. So we've had the daily briefings during the COVID lockdown, and we've seen the types of questions and what seems like a very repetitive nature in terms of the questions that are being asked. And I see lots of people getting frustrated by it, but there's a reason behind that, right, Pete? So it's kind of alluding to what you were saying, that it's all about the sound bites and getting that 10 to 15 second clip. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And so sometimes the reporter might, or the presenter, they might think, okay, we want an answer on this particular question for our news bulletin. And then so if you answer that a particular way, they might say, well, that's not really very kind of attractive, so I'm going to ask it again. And hopefully they'll answer it in a more brief way, in a more interesting way. Yep. And so that's really common. And it's not always just that the reporters weren't listening, because, there is actually quite a lot of stress on their side. I mean, during my I often do these one-day full-on courses where I get people on camera 5 times. At one point, I sometimes get them to interview each other, just so that you can see the dynamics from the reporter. And a lot of them hate it, and they say, God, I'd rather be interviewed than be the interviewer. Because I'm saying, well, you've got a news story to get out first thing tomorrow morning. You're reliant on this person. And so that's why also we have to help them if we can.
Yes.
Because they're going to get a story regardless. And if you're not helping them, they'll go negative on you. But if you can dress your points up in nice, attractive ways, like I mentioned with John Key, everyone can win. But you do have to know how to do it, and you do have to practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Which leads quite neatly into, if you are a senior leader, if you're looking to become a more effective communicator, if you are an owner of a business, perhaps within a high risk industry, investing your time in getting this stuff right not only matters when it hits the fan, but can be really useful in times of greatness as well. And those moments when suddenly you find yourselves in front of a microphone picking up the award for your great achievements for the year, and also for social media side of things as well, which many people are still stumbling and fumbling around with. So Pete, where would you suggest people reach out to you? Where's the best way to find out a little bit more about yourself?
Well, I've actually got quite a lot of websites, so I'm just trying to think which one. If they went to peteburdon.com, and that's Burdon, O-N, not E-N, you can either contact me there, or there's a little free report there on these things that you could download for free. Because I do have a webinar coming up in about a month too that I'll be keen to let people know about as well. That'll cover the stuff in more detail. So that would be fantastic. But if they just go to that website, they'll find out there, peteburdon.com.
Amazing. That's brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much for your insights. I think it's a really interesting topic. It's a topic that will always be there, and I think is something that is not necessarily thought about enough. And I think it's a really great item to have in your reserve and to have in your toolkit, is to be confident and to know the do's and don'ts when it comes to dealing and managing with the media. So Pete, thank you so much. I'm really, really pleased it was you that was the person that wrapped up this session, because I think it's really exciting stuff and critical for a successful health and safety leader. So thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Matt, and great work on the event. It's great.
Thank you very much. All right, you have a wonderful day, and look, I'll reach out. We'll catch up over a coffee sometime soon. Okay.
That'd be great. Yeah.